The crystalline spires of Nexus Prime stretched toward the violet sky, their surfaces reflecting the light of 3 distant suns. Within the central chamber, representatives from 47 species gathered in the circular hall of the Galactic Council. Ambassador Minji stood at the human podium, her dark hair pulled back in a simple bun, her expression calm despite the heated debate surrounding her. She wore the deep blue uniform of Earth's diplomatic corps, a small silver pin on her collar, the only adornment she allowed herself. The border dispute between the Kroth and the Valorian colonies can be resolved peacefully, Minji said, her voice carrying clearly through the translation matrix. I propose a neutral arbitration committee. A harsh, grating laugh cut through her words. Commander Thrax of the Kroth Empire rose from his section. His scaled body towered 3 meters tall, crimson eyes gleaming with contempt. He was massive, covered in dark red scales that looked like armor. His forked tongue flickered between sharp teeth. The human speaks of peace again. How predictable. His voice was deep and mocking. Your species has sat on this council for 150 years. In all that time, what have you done? You negotiate. You compromise. You give up. Minji remained standing, her hands clasped behind her back. Her face showed no emotion, but her eyes were sharp and focused. We prefer talking to fighting, Commander. Is that weakness or wisdom? It is weakness. Thrax slammed a clawed fist against his podium. The sound echoed through the chamber like thunder. The Kroth take what is ours by right of strength. The Valorians are in our territory. They will pay us or be removed. Beside Minji, Junior Ambassador Doyen tensed. His jaw tightened. He was young for a diplomat, barely 30, but his eyes missed nothing. He leaned slightly toward Minji and whispered through their private communication link, "The Luminar and Jin representatives are silent. They will not oppose him." Minji had already noticed. The insectoid Jin clustered in their section, their compound eyes reflecting no emotion. The crystalline Luminar pulsed with soft amber light, their way of showing they would stay neutral. She addressed the council once more. I call for a vote on the establishment of an arbitration committee. The vote was swift. 23 against, 18 in favor, 6 abstentions. Not enough. Thrax's laughter echoed again through the chamber. You see, human? This is the way of the galaxy. The strong decide. The weak obey. He turned his massive head toward her, scales catching the light. Perhaps one day your kind will learn this lesson. Minji gathered her documents without responding. Her movements were precise and controlled. Doyen followed her lead, collecting their materials. As they walked toward the exit, other species watched them with various expressions. Some showed pity. Others showed contempt. A few showed concern. The doors sealed behind them with a soft hiss. Once in the corridor, Doyen finally spoke. They treat us like children. Like we are naive. Let them, Minji said quietly, her voice steady. Their perception is not our concern. They walked in silence through the diplomatic wing's corridors. The walls were transparent in places, showing the vast expanse of space beyond. Ships of various designs moved through the docking lanes. Back in their quarters, Minji sat at her desk. The holographic display before her showed star charts and trade routes. Her fingers moved across the controls, updating data. Doyen paced near the window. His usual composure was cracking. Does it ever frustrate you? That we cannot do more? Minji was quiet for a long moment. Her eyes were distant, as if seeing something far away. Every day, she finally admitted. But we chose this path. After the wars on Earth, after everything our species endured to reach the stars, we chose peace. She pulled up another display showing Earth's blue-green sphere floating in space. We are here to trade, to learn, to grow. Not to fight. And if someone forces us to fight? The question hung in the air between them. Minji did not answer immediately. She stared at the image of Earth, at the planet that had seen so much war before finally finding peace among the stars. Then we respond, she said finally, her voice barely above a whisper. But only when we must. Doyen wanted to ask more, but something in her tone made him stop. There was weight in those words, a heaviness that suggested she knew more than she was saying. Outside their window, the stars gleamed cold and distant. Ships continued their peaceful movements through space, trading goods and information. The galaxy seemed calm. But calm, as history had shown time and again, was often temporary. 3 days after the council vote, the emergency alert pierced through every console in the human quarters on Nexus Prime. The sound was sharp and urgent, cutting through the quiet of the evening cycle. Minji was reviewing supply reports when the red icon appeared on her screen. She opened the channel immediately, her heart already beginning to race. Director Taeyong's face appeared. He was the head of Earth's United Defense Command, a position that had been mostly ceremonial for decades. His gray hair was messy and dark circles shadowed his eyes. He looked like he had not slept in days. Ambassador Minji, he said, his voice carefully controlled. We have received reports from New Horizon Colony. Minji's blood ran cold. New Horizon was an agricultural world on the outer rim of human space. Nearly 2 million civilians lived there. Families, children, people who had left Earth seeking a simple life among the stars, growing crops under alien suns. What happened? Her voice came out steady despite the fear gripping her chest. Taeyong's jaw tightened. Pain flashed across his face. 6 hours ago, a Kroth battle fleet entered the system. They issued no warning, made no demands. He paused and Minji saw his hands clench. They fired on the planet from orbit. Plasma bombardment. The colony's shields held for 19 minutes. The room seemed to tilt. Minji gripped the edge of her desk. How many survivors? Taeyong closed his eyes briefly. Preliminary estimates, 200,000. The evacuation centers in the northern continent managed to get people underground. The rest. His voice cracked slightly. The rest did not make it. The fleet destroyed the southern hemisphere before jumping away. 1.8 million people. Gone. Burned away in minutes. Doyen had entered the room at some point during the call. His face had gone pale as he listened. Why? He asked, his voice barely audible. Intelligence suggests it was a test, Taeyong said, his voice turning hard as steel. Thrax wanted to see if humanity would respond. If we would finally show our strength or if we would continue to negotiate. Minji felt something cold settle in her chest. A terrible clarity. What are our orders? You are to bring this before the Council. Demand accountability under the Nexus Treaty. Request immediate sanctions and reparations. Taeyong looked directly at the camera. And if they refuse, we handle it ourselves. The transmission ended, leaving them in silence. Minji sat motionless, staring at the darkened screen. In her mind, she saw faces from the last census report of New Horizon. The farming families posing with their harvests. Teachers with their students. Engineers proud of the irrigation systems they had built. All gone now. Ashen memory. They made a mistake, Doyen said quietly. His voice was different now. Cold. Controlled. Dangerous. They think we are weak because we choose peace. They do not understand that we choose it. Minji stood slowly. Her movements were deliberate, precise. She pulled up the Council's emergency protocols and sent out a request for an immediate assembly. They are about to learn, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. God help them, they are about to learn. 2 hours later, Minji stood before the Galactic Council once more. But the atmosphere had changed. News of New Horizon had spread through the station like wildfire. Delegates whispered to each other, their eyes darting toward the human section with new wariness. Thrax sat in his seat, his posture relaxed. Almost proud. A slight smile played at the edges of his mouth. Minji activated the central holo display. Images appeared above the assembly. First, the beautiful fields of New Horizon before the attack. Golden crops swaying under an amber sky, children playing near irrigation streams, the small cities with their modest towers reaching toward the clouds. Then the after images. Scorched earth. Melted cities. Glowing craters where millions had lived and worked and laughed. The silence in the chamber was absolute. New Horizon Colony, Minji began, her voice steady and clear. Population, 2,300,000. Humans, yes, but also 6,000 Valorian refugees we had granted asylum. 12,000 Nyx traders who made their homes among us. 500 children born just this year. She let the images continue cycling, showing the destruction in terrible detail. 6 hours ago, a Kroth military fleet entered the system. They gave no warning, made no demands. They simply opened fire. Her eyes found Thrax across the chamber. This was not war. This was not conquest. This was murder. Thrax stood slowly, his massive form dominating his section. The smile was still there. It was a necessary demonstration. The humans needed to understand their place in this galaxy. Gasps echoed through the chamber. Even the normally emotionless Gen representatives seemed to recoil. The crystalline luminar flashed with shocked red light. Under the Nexus Treaty, Article 7, I formally request this council hold the Kroth Empire accountable, Minji continued. Her voice never wavered. I request immediate military sanctions, reparations to the survivors, and the arrest of Commander Thrax for crimes against sentient life. The vote was called. The delegates entered their decisions. 25 abstentions. 18 in favor. 4 against. Not enough. The motion failed. The council speaker announced the result in a trembling voice. The motion fails to achieve the required majority. However, the council issues a formal warning to the Kroth Empire. No. Minji's single word cut through the chamber like a knife through flesh. Every eye turned to her. Humanity formally withdraws from all council proceedings, effective immediately. She began gathering her materials with deliberate calm. We will honor our existing trade agreements, but we will no longer participate in this body's decisions. Her movements were precise, controlled. You had a choice today. You chose cowardice. She walked toward the chamber doors, Doyen and the other human aides following. The silence was deafening. At the threshold, Minji turned back one final time. Her eyes found Thrax. You wanted to know if humanity was weak, Commander? Her voice carried across the silent chamber with terrible clarity. You are about to find out exactly how strong we are. I suggest you pray to whatever gods your people believe in. The doors sealed behind them with a resonant boom that echoed like a death knell. In his seat, Thrax's smile finally faded. The emergency broadcast reached every human ship, station, and colony simultaneously. Director Taeyung's face appeared on screens across human-controlled space, his expression carved from stone. Citizens of humanity, he began. New Horizon has fallen. 1.8 million of our people are dead. The Galactic Council has refused to act. He paused, letting the words sink in across hundreds of worlds and thousands of ships. For 150 years, we have been peaceful. We have been patient. We chose diplomacy because we remembered the cost of war, the billions lost in the unification wars, the scars on our own homeworld. His voice hardened like steel cooling. But we also remember how to fight. And we have never forgotten. Across human space, things began to change. Military facilities that had appeared to be simple research stations suddenly transformed. Cargo ships docked at hidden facilities and emerged days later looking completely different. Angular armor plating covered their hulls, weapon arrays extended from hidden compartments. Captain Juno commanded what the galaxy knew as the cargo vessel Morning Star. The ship's registry listed it as a grain transport, hauling agricultural products between human colonies. But that had always been a lie. He stood on his bridge as the retrofit completed, watching through the view screen as the false panels fell away. Beneath the civilian exterior, his ship had always been a warship. The cargo holds were filled with railgun ammunition and missile pods, not grain. The engines were military-grade, capable of speeds no merchant vessel could match. All systems green, reported Lieutenant Suki from the weapons station. Her fingers moved across her console with practiced ease, the movements of someone who had trained for this moment for years. Targeting computers online. Point defense systems active. Weapons hot. Good. Juno pulled up the tactical display. Across the grid, hundreds of other ships were doing the same, the entire human merchant fleet shedding its peaceful disguise like a snake shedding skin. Set course for Rally Point Omega. It is time the galaxy saw what we really are. The transformation was not just military. Across human networks, something else was happening. Quiet infiltrations that had been in place for decades suddenly activated. Human technicians who had been maintaining alien computer systems for years suddenly accessed protocols no one knew existed. In the Kroth Military Command Network, alarms began to sound. Their communications chief stared at his console in disbelief. Sir, we are detecting massive intrusions. Human code is everywhere in our systems. They have been inside our networks for years. A countdown appeared on every Kroth military screen. Simple. Precise. Terrifying. 47 minutes and 23 seconds. 47 minutes and 22 seconds. 47 minutes and 21 seconds. No one could shut it off. The counter appeared on warships, space stations, planetary defense grids. Every Kroth military asset in the Empire saw the same countdown, ticking relentlessly toward zero. Commander Thrax stood in his command chamber aboard the flagship Dominator, his scales pale with something he had never felt before, fear. What is this? What are they doing? His tactical officer looked up from his console, his voice shaking. Sir, they are demonstrating. Showing us they can reach anything, anywhere. If they can put a countdown on our screens, they can put a virus. A weapon. Anything. At exactly zero, the attack began. But it was not the grand battle Thrax had expected. It was surgical. Precise. 47 Kroth military installations were hit simultaneously, not by massive fleets, but by small human strike forces that appeared from nowhere, struck with devastating accuracy, and vanished before anyone could respond. Captain Juno's Morning Star emerged from faster-than-light travel directly above a Kroth military shipyard. His railguns fired 3 times. 3 shots. The first severed the station's power grid, plunging it into darkness. The second destroyed the defense platforms before they could rotate to target him. The third crippled the docking facilities, leaving dozens of Kroth warships trapped and unable to launch. 30 seconds. That was how long the Morning Star remained in the system. Then it was gone, jumping back into faster-than-light space, leaving the station intact but completely helpless. The pattern repeated across Kroth space. Humans did not destroy planets. They did not target civilians. They did not glass cities from orbit. Instead, they destroyed military capability with calculated efficiency. Power grids severed. Defense platforms eliminated. Communication arrays disabled. Ships trapped in docks. Commanders left blind and unable to coordinate. It was not conquest. It was dissection. Lieutenant Suki monitored the tactical network from her station as the Morning Star regrouped with the fleet. Sir, all targets hit. 0 human casualties. Kroth military effectiveness reduced by 63% across all sectors. Phase 2, Juno ordered. Across the combat zone, human ships began broadcasting on all frequencies. But they were not sending threats. They were sending information. Detailed records of Kroth military movements over the past decade. Proof of planned attacks on civilian populations. Evidence of war crimes dating back years. Communications between Kroth commanders discussing which colonies to target. For examples. Every species in the galaxy received the data simultaneously. The broadcasts were impossible to block, sent on every frequency, translated into every known language. The Kroth Empire's reputation shattered in hours. What the galaxy had seen as a strong military power was revealed as brutal aggressors who targeted the weak. Commander Thrax watched his empire crumble from his command chair. His fleets were scattered, unable to coordinate without their communications network. His stations were crippled, running on emergency power. His carefully built image of strength was destroyed by humanity's information warfare. "Get me Ambassador Minji," he roared at his communications officer. "I will negotiate terms." The officer shook his head, his scales showing fear. "She is not responding to any Kroth signals, sir. But we are receiving a message. Military channel. From someone called Director Taeyun." The message was brief and direct. "Commander Thrax, you wanted humanity to show its strength. Congratulations. You have seen 5% of our capability. Continue resistance and we will demonstrate why our species spent 10,000 years perfecting the art of war before we ever left our homeworld. You have 24 hours to surrender yourself for trial. After that, we stop being gentle." Thrax stared at the message. 5%. Everything they had done, the simultaneous strikes, the network infiltration, the information warfare, the surgical dismantling of his entire military, was 5%. For the first time in his life, Commander Thrax understood true fear. 3 weeks later, the war was over. The Kroth Empire formally surrendered. Thrax was extradited to stand trial, his flagship disabled and boarded by human special forces who moved through the ship like ghosts, neutralizing his elite guards without firing a single lethal shot. The galaxy watched in stunned silence as humanity demonstrated not just the capacity for violence, but something far more terrifying, the discipline to control it exactly as they chose. The trial of Commander Thrax became the most watched event in galactic history. Held in a neutral space station far from both human and Kroth territory, the proceedings were broadcast live to every species in the council. Prosecutor Hyun-woo stood before the tribunal, his uniform crisp and spotless, his voice steady and clear. He was young for such a responsibility, barely 35, but he carried himself with gravity. Behind him, invisible but ever-present, was the weight of 1.8 million dead. "The prosecution will demonstrate that Commander Thrax knowingly ordered the massacre of New Horizon Colony," Hyun-woo began. "We will present evidence showing this was not an act of war, but premeditated murder." Thrax sat in restraints designed for his large frame, his scales dull and faded. The once proud commander looked diminished, smaller somehow. His defense attorney, a luminar named Bright Truth, pulsed with resigned amber light. Even the defender knew this case was lost before it began. Hyun-woo pulled up the first piece of evidence. Intercepted communications appeared on the display, translated into every language. Thrax's own voice filled the chamber. Target the civilian centers first. I want the humans to understand fear. Avoid the military outposts, they can defend themselves. Hit the farms, the schools, the hospitals. The tribunal, composed of judges from 7 different species, listened in silence. Some shifted uncomfortably. Others remained perfectly still. The commander had a choice, Hyunwoo continued. If this was truly about demonstrating Kroth's strength, he could have targeted military installations. New Horizon had 3 small defense platforms. He could have destroyed those and made his point. He gestured to the tactical display. Instead, his fleet bypassed those platforms entirely and fired directly on population centers. More evidence followed. Trajectory data showing the Kroth weapons had been carefully aimed at cities, not military targets. Communication logs showing Thrax had ignored surrender offers from the colony governor. Temperature readings from the planet's surface showing how hot the plasma bombardment had been, hot enough to ensure no survivors in the impact zones. But the most damning evidence came next. Hyunwoo displayed faces. One at a time at first, then in groups. Park Min-seo, age 6, he said quietly. A photo appeared of a small girl with bright eyes, holding a drawing she had made of the purple flowers that grew near her family's farm. She wanted to be an artist. Another face. Dr. Jeon, age 42. She delivered 317 babies in New Horizons Hospital. She saved countless lives. Another. Engineer Sang-woo, age 51. He designed the irrigation systems that made New Horizons farms so productive. He was working on improvements when the bombardment began. The faces continued. 1,200. Then 12,000. The display kept going, an endless parade of the murdered. Teachers, farmers, children, parents, grandparents. Each one a life, a story, a future stolen. The tribunal chambers were absolutely silent except for Hyunwoo's voice, reading names and brief descriptions. Hour after hour. The faces continued to appear, looking out at the galaxy, bearing witness to their own deaths. Even Thrax looked away. His scales had gone pale gray, the color of shame in his species. These were not soldiers, Hyunwoo said quietly when the display finally ended. These were not warriors. These were farmers who wanted to grow food. Teachers who wanted to educate children. Doctors who wanted to heal the sick. He turned to face Thrax directly. And you killed them to prove a point, Commander? He walked closer to where Thrax sat. Well, you proved your point. You demonstrated that the Kroth Empire was willing to commit mass murder. You showed the galaxy what true barbarism looks like. Hyunwoo's voice hardened. Now humanity has a point to prove. That monsters will be held accountable. That might does not make right. That justice still exists in this galaxy. The tribunal deliberated for less than an hour. The verdict came swiftly and unanimously. Guilty on all charges. Mass murder. War crimes. Crimes against sentient life. The sentence was life imprisonment on a human penal world. No torture. No execution. Just endless time in a comfortable but isolated cell, alone with his thoughts and memories, contemplating what he had done for the rest of his very long life. As the guards led Thrax away, he stopped and looked at Hyunwoo. Your species will become what I am, he rasped, his voice rough. Power corrupts. You have shown you can destroy. Eventually you will not be able to stop. You will become the monsters you fought. Hyunwoo met his eyes without flinching. We have been destroying things since before we had words for it, Commander. We nearly destroyed our own planet multiple times. We killed billions of our own people in wars that lasted generations. He stepped closer. The difference is we learned when to stop. We learned the difference between strength and cruelty. We learned that power without restraint is not strength, it is weakness. He paused. That is a lesson your people never mastered. Perhaps in your cell you will have time to learn it. The guards took Thrax away. The massive Kroth commander, who had once seemed so powerful and terrifying, shuffled out of the chamber like an old, broken thing. The trial was over. Justice had been served. But Hyunwoo felt no satisfaction, no triumph. He thought of the faces he had shown, 1.8 million people who would never see justice for themselves, who would never know that their deaths had changed the galaxy. Later, in his quarters, Hyunwoo sat alone in the dark. On his desk was a small photo. His sister had lived on New Horizon. She had been a teacher working with young children, teaching them to read. She had died in the first wave of bombardment, protecting her students, trying to get them to the shelters. He picked up the photo, looking at her smiling face. We kept our promise, Soyeon, he whispered. He will never hurt anyone again. The galaxy had learned an important lesson. Humanity would not conquer. They would not seek empire. But they would ensure justice. They would protect the innocent. And they would hold the guilty accountable, no matter how powerful they thought they were. The age of might makes right was over. A new era had begun, one where rules mattered, where justice was real, where the strong protected the weak instead of preying on them. Thrax had wanted to teach humanity about strength. Instead, humanity had taught the galaxy about justice. And that lesson would echo through the stars for generations to come. The new council chambers on Nexus Prime had been redesigned. Gone were the hierarchical tiers and positioning based on military might. Instead, delegates sat in a circle, all at equal height, a human suggestion that had met initial resistance but proved effective. Ambassador Minji addressed the assembly, her silver hair now showing at the temples, a mark of the years since New Horizon. Lines had appeared around her eyes, evidence of sleepless nights and difficult decisions. The Vasquez protocols have been in effect for 3 years. It is time we assess their effectiveness. The protocols, named for humanity's first ambassador to die in service, killed in a transport accident, not violence, which somehow seemed fitting, had fundamentally altered galactic warfare. Civilians were now protected under council law. War crimes were prosecuted swiftly. Most importantly, might no longer made right. The Jeune representative clicked its mandibles in what passed for approval among their species. Conflicts have decreased by 47% galaxy-wide. Civilian casualties in remaining conflicts have dropped by 82%. Numbers on a screen. Statistics. But behind each percentage point were thousands of lives saved, families kept whole, children who grew up without seeing their homes burned. Because everyone fears human intervention, grumbled the new Kroth representative. Her name was Vexen, a younger female who represented the reformed Kroth government. She bore scars across her scales, marks from the civil war that had followed Thrax's fall, when the Kroth people had torn their own empire apart, rejecting the old ways. Is peace achieved through fear truly peace? Minji met her eyes directly. There was no hostility in the gaze, only honest inquiry. An honest question deserves an honest answer. No, it is not. She gestured to the display showing pre-protocol conflict statistics, rivers of red indicating wars, massacres, genocides. But it is better than the alternative. Under the old system, an average of 3 billion sentient beings died in wars every year. Now, fewer than 50 million. She let that sink in. Fear is not ideal. But it is saving lives while we build something better. Something based on trust instead of terror. That takes time. Vexen bowed her head, conceding the point. Around the circle, other delegates nodded or made their species equivalent gestures of agreement. In Earth's military command center, Admiral Jisoo reviewed deployment schedules with growing concern. She was the youngest person to ever hold the position, promoted after the Kroth War for her brilliant tactical work. But brilliance did not make the impossible possible. We are stretched thin, she told Director Taeyong during their weekly briefing. He was in his final year before retirement, his hair now completely white. Peacekeeping missions on 17 worlds. Border patrols in 9 sectors. Training operations on 43 stations. She pulled up crew rotation schedules. Red indicators showed personnel working beyond recommended limits. Our people are exhausted. We are not an empire, sir. We cannot be everywhere. Taeyong studied the data with the careful attention he had always given to details. Recommendations. We need to start trusting others to handle regional issues. The Luminar have proven capable. The Jinn are reliable. Even the reformed Kroth government is showing promise. Jisoo leaned forward, her expression serious. We proved humanity can fight. Now we need to prove we can step back. The council will see it as weakness. Let them. Jisoo's expression hardened. We did not fight a war to become the galaxy's police force. We fought to establish rules that everyone would follow. It is time we let them prove they can follow those rules without us watching over their shoulders constantly. The decision was made. Humanity would begin gradually reducing its peacekeeping presence, transferring responsibility to regional coalitions. It was a risk, a gamble, but a necessary one. On the prison world where Thrax was held, a visitor arrived, unexpected and controversial. Vexen, the Kroth representative, stood outside his cell. The facility was not cruel. The cell was comfortable with proper temperature and lighting. But it was empty. No companions. No distractions. Just time and memory. Why have you come? Thrax asked. His voice was rough from years of little use. He looked older, diminished. The cell was not torture, but isolation had worn him down in ways physical pain never could. To understand, Vexen said. The younger generation needs to know why you did it. What you were thinking. Thrax laughed, but it was a bitter sound without humor. I thought I was strong. I thought strength meant the ability to destroy. He looked at his claws, once weapons he had been proud of, now just old appendages. The humans taught me the truth. Any fool can destroy. Strength is the discipline to create, to protect, to build something worth defending. Is that regret I hear? Thrax was quiet for a long moment. Regret? He considered the word. No. Understanding, perhaps. I took 1.8 million lives because I wanted to prove humanity was weak. Instead, I proved my people were barbaric. He met her eyes. Do not make my mistakes, Vexen. The humans gave us a second chance. Most species would not have been so merciful. The visit ended shortly after. As Vexen left, she passed the human guard, a young soldier named Minsu who had lost family on New Horizon but treated Thrax with professional respect. Never cruel, never vindictive. Does he suffer? Vexen asked quietly. Minsu considered the question carefully. He lives with what he did. Every day. Forever. No distractions. No escape. He paused. My grandmother died on New Horizon. Part of me wants him to hurt. But the smarter part knows this is worse. Remembering, understanding, living with the weight of it. It is a very human punishment. The galaxy watched as humanity deliberately weakened its military presence. Ships were recalled. Bases were scaled back. Command of 3 major sectors was transferred to regional coalitions made up of multiple species working together. In the council, nervous whispers spread. Are they planning something? Is this a trap? Why would they give up power voluntarily? Ambassador Minji addressed the concerns directly, standing before the circular assembly. Humanity is not retreating. We are trusting. We established rules. We proved we would enforce them. Now we are giving you the chance to uphold them yourselves. She smiled slightly. Besides, our fleets are not going away. They are just redeploying. Close enough to help if needed, far enough to let you stand on your own. It was Admiral Jisoo who explained it best during a military conference attended by observers from 30 species. There is an old human saying, if you want peace, prepare for war. She gestured to the training facilities around them, where soldiers from dozens of species learned together. But there is a second part, we added, but only fight if you must. Power without restraint is tyranny. Restraint without power is vulnerability. Balance is strength. The attending officers, Kroth, Zhen, Luminar, Valorian, and dozens of others, nodded slowly. Understanding was spreading. The human way was not about conquest or empire. It was about building a system where everyone could thrive, protected by rules that applied equally to all.